Few weeks ago, I took a night shift at an old hospital. I lost my job at the clinic, and I wanted some peace to find my footing. The hospital smelled musty, with cracked walls and flickering lights. It looked like it hadn't seen a patient in years. That first night, I was doing routine checks when I heard tapping sounds echoing in the empty hallways. At first, I thought it was just old pipes or maybe rodents, but it grew louder and became more urgent. A chill ran down my spine. Instead of feeling scared, I felt curious. I wanted to know what was making those sounds. As the nights passed, those taps turned into heavy footsteps above me. My heart raced whenever I heard them. Should I ignore them? I wasn't sure. It felt wrong to pretend nothing was happening. The noises seemed to grow louder as the clock ticked on. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was just tired and jumpy, but deep down, anxiety gnawed at me. One night I stood frozen as whispers floated from abandoned patient rooms. It was unnerving. They were low and unintelligible. I walked toward the source, my heart pounding. My hands were cold and trembling. The floor creaked under my weight, and I wished I had someone with me. But it was just me and those whispers like shadows brought to life. I had never felt so uneasy. As I walked, I noticed drawings on the walls. They were rough and creepy. Lines and shapes drawn by the last patients. I felt sick looking at them. They were remnants from a time I couldn't understand. I wanted to leave, but I needed the money. Still, every night, I second-guessed my decision to stay. Maybe I should have quit. Each night I wondered if there was something sinister in those walls, something that shouldn't be disturbed. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Stress always does that, right? But then the whispers grew louder, echoing everywhere. Every floorboard creak seemed to cry out. On my final night, everything changed. I heard a sound that shook me. It was deep and low, like a voice or a growl. I needed to follow it. I felt terrified but drawn to it. I walked slowly, my breath quickening. The whispers stopped. It was as if the hospital held its breath. I turned a corner, and that's when I saw it. The figure stood at the end of the hallway. I could barely make it out, tall and dark, almost blending with the shadows. My heart stopped. I blinked, and it was gone. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back and ran. I didn't look back until I was outside and safe in my car. Now every time I close my eyes, I see that figure. Part of me thinks I left something behind. Something wants me to remember. I can't shake the feeling that I'll never truly escape the echoes of that hospital. I barely slept after that last shift. The figure haunted my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still tied to me. What if the hospital had a grip on me? The idea left me uneasy. I wanted to forget, but it felt like the more I tried, the stronger the memories became. The next morning I found myself driving back toward the hospital. I kept asking myself why I was doing this. I wanted answers, but deep down, I was terrified. I parked in front of the building and took a deep breath. The musty smell hit me like a wall as I stepped inside. Everything felt different without the night's shadows clinging to the corners. As I made my way down the corridor, I noticed the sunlight streaming through the cracked windows. It should have been comforting, but it only highlighted the peeling paint and dust. I looked for the drawings I had seen before. They should have been a distant memory, but I needed to see them again. Maybe it would help me understand. After a few minutes of wandering, I found the room. My stomach twisted as I pushed open the door. The walls were covered in more drawings, but now they seemed more detailed, almost alive in the daylight. Shapes took on meanings, like cries for help. I stepped closer, examining a drawing of a figure that looked just like the one I had seen. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Suddenly I heard a creaking noise behind me. I spun around, ready to bolt. But it was just an old gurney that had shifted. Still, fear filled me again. I had to get out. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the floor, a piece of paper crumpled near the door. My heart raced. I picked it up, studying it closely. It was a rough sketch, but it looked like a map of the hospital. A red X marked a room that I had never noticed before. I stared at it, piecing together what it might mean. Why was there a hidden room, a clue? As far as I knew, the hospital had been empty for years. I quickly shoved the paper into my pocket, deciding I couldn't leave without finding out what was in that hidden room. I could feel dread crawling up my spine as I searched for the location marked on the map. My hands were clammy against the pages as I moved deeper into the hospital. It was eerily quiet, almost as if the building was holding its breath again, waiting for something to happen. Finally, I reached a door that matched the sketch. My heart raced. I hesitated, nerves racking my body. Should I really do this? A pulse of doubt hit me. Whatever lay behind that door felt heavy with secrets. But curiosity overwhelmed me. I grabbed the handle and pushed it open. What I saw made my stomach drop. The room was filled with old hospital beds, each draped in dusty sheets. Scattered papers lined the floor. One sheet caught my eye. As I stepped closer, I realized it had names, dozens of names. My hands shook as I read them. That's when I heard it, a low growl echoing from the dark corner of the room. I froze, heart pounding. The sound seemed to vibrate through the air, chilling me to the bone. I glanced back at the doorway. I had to get out. But what if I was blocked from escaping? I took a shaky breath and turned slowly, squinting into the darkness. The growl came again, lower and deeper, twisting my stomach further. Without thinking, I stepped back, creeping toward the door. My feet brushed against the papers littering the floor, sending a few skidding away. I winced at the noise. Every rustle felt amplified in the oppressive silence of the room. My pulse quickened, and I felt a sudden urge to scream, but I swallowed it down. The growling shifted, a sound that morphed into something like whispering. It was almost as if words were slipping through the cracks, desperate and tortured. My brain raced with thoughts. What was hiding in the shadows? Was it one of the names on that list? I felt a surge of anger. How could I have come here? This place was filled with ghosts. I refocused on the papers scattered around. I picked one up, frantic to decipher any information that could explain what I'd found. Beneath the jumble of names there were dates, some scribbled hastily, others written neatly. I noticed a pattern. The last entries were all marked with the same month and year. A chill swept over me. All the names had died here? Or worse. Suddenly, the growl morphed into a snarl, echoing loudly, and I spun back toward the corner. What if whatever was lurking in the shadows saw me? I had to move. I couldn't just stand there. As I backed up, my foot caught on something. I stumbled, falling onto the floor with a loud thud. The noise seemed to trigger something. The growling intensified, now mixed with something that sounded like a low, agonized wail. I pushed myself up and made a dash for the door, but as I reached it, the door slammed shut. My heart raced as I fumbled for the handle, twisting it desperately. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me and I turned back to the room, breathing heavily. I had to calm down and think. I scanned the corners again, daring to hope it was just a rat or a stray animal. But deep inside, I knew it was something far worse. I was trapped, and whatever was behind me was getting closer. Then I heard it again, something shifting behind the beds. Was it my imagination, or could I see a figure in the dim light? I squinted. The outline was unmistakable, rising from nothingness. It was there, a dark mass, and it was moving. What should I do now? The door wouldn't open, and I couldn't risk the figure noticing me. I crouched low, my heart hammering faster. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, I noticed something gleaming on the floor, an old scalpel. It was my only chance. Before I could fully think through my plan, I lunged for it and turned to face the figure. I wouldn't go down without a fight. That's when I heard another noise, a slam, echoing through the hallway beyond the door. In that instant, my blood ran cold. Someone else was in the building. The sound of the slam replayed in my mind, chilling me to the core. I gripped the scalpel tightly, my knuckles aching. The figure in the corner seemed to pause, caught between its own intentions and whatever had just disrupted its focus. My breath quickened. I was no longer alone, but who or what had entered the building? I glanced back at the doorway. I could still hear the echo of footsteps, heavier now, approaching. I had to make a choice. I couldn't stay hidden forever. The figure seemed to shift and I caught the glint of something sharp in its outline. A claw? Teeth? The growling resumed, now punctuated by an unsettling harmony of whispers. "Get out," they seemed to say, the voices overlapping, taunting me. Adrenaline surged through me. I scrambled to the side of the room, hoping to find a shadowy corner to hide in. The scalpel felt inadequate against whatever this presence was. My heart raced, but there was no time to think about fear. I needed to survive. As the footsteps drew closer, a light flickered down the hallway. I could see a silhouette moving toward the room. It looked human, a figure in a long coat, their face obscured by the dim light. Who were they? Was this another threat, or could they help me? I held my breath, my body ready to react, scalpel raised. The figure drew closer, pushing the door open. "Are you in here?" a voice called, deep and muffled. I didn't move. I didn't trust anyone. But then the silhouette stepped further into the room and I realized it wasn't just any person. It was someone I recognized. "Jack," I whispered, my voice barely escaping my lips. He stopped, eyes wide with shock as he took in the scene. "What are you doing here?" Panic threaded through his words as he spotted the dark mass in the corner. There was no time to explain. "Get back!" I yelled, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure in the shadows froze at the sound of my voice, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it seemed to swell, growing larger as it stepped closer. Jack turned, finally noticing the entity that had stalked me. "What the hell is that?" he breathed, taking a step back. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, I could see the fear mirrored in his expression. The growl erupted again, filling the room, and I saw it then. The glint of pale eyes peering through the darkness. They narrowed. The air thickened with dread. "Run!" I shouted. But as soon as the command left my lips, the mass lunged forward, and I knew then I had to act. Without thinking, I dashed toward Jack, pulling him with me just as the figure sprang. My thoughts scrambled. There had to be another way out. I turned to the left, searching for a window or a second exit, but the room was closing in on us. That's when I spotted it. An old vent in the wall, slightly ajar. It seemed like a tiny glimmer of hope. I bolted towards it, dragging Jack with me, desperation fueling my movements. "We have to get out of here," I shouted, urgency clawing at my throat. But just as we reached the vent, a heavy thud shook the place and the darkness behind us erupted. My heart sank. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't going to let us go. With a swift motion, I pushed Jack ahead and squeezed through the vent. The air was stale and musty, but I focused on the next step. "Keep moving, it's right behind us," I urged. I could hear the growl so close now, echoing in the tight space. Whatever haunted that room was relentless. We weren't safe yet. But as I crawled further, I felt a jarring tug. The vent rattled violently. Something was trying to pull me back. Desperation surged through me. I needed to know what I was up against if I was ever going to escape this nightmare. I kicked my legs harder, the metal of the vent groaning under the strain. Jack was ahead, scrambling to escape the terror pursuing us. I could barely hear his panicked breaths mixing with the growl behind us. My heart raced, and each second felt like an eternity as that horrific entity clawed closer. I caught a glimpse of light ahead, the exit. "There!" I shouted, hope flaring inside me. Jack pushed forward, his hands reaching desperately, and I followed, forcing my body to move even as the grip of darkness clawed at my ankles. Then, just as we neared the end of the vent, the force tugging at my legs intensified. I screamed, feeling the cool metal scrape against my skin. My fingers brushed the edge of the opening, but every effort to pull free felt feeble under the pressure. "Jack!" I yelled, panic rising. "Hold on!" he called back, his voice shaky but determined. I felt his hand grasp my arm, pulling with every ounce of strength. The growl became deafening, reverberating through the small space, sending chills down my spine. But Jack's grip was firm, and with one final thrust I shot out of the vent and tumbled onto the hard floor. I rolled to a stop, coughing from the dust that filled the air. But there was no time to recover. I could hear Jack wriggling behind me, the vent shaking ominously. The dark mass was still pursuing. "Get up," I urged, scrambling to my feet. My surroundings blurred, the faint light overhead flickering erratically as I searched for an escape route. We were in a narrow, dimly lit corridor lined with stale, peeling walls and closed doors. The oppressive gloom felt alive, pressing in from all sides. Jack crawled out seconds later, gasping for breath. "Which way?" he asked, eyes darting around, searching for an exit. "Anywhere but here," I shouted. I darted to the right, adrenaline pushing my body forward. I didn't know where we were, but the need to escape drove me. As our footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, I could feel it growing closer, a dark shadow lurking at the edges of my vision. Jack quickly caught up with me and we pushed through a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. The room was massive, filled with old, rusted medical equipment. The smell of decay was overpowering, and it made my stomach turn. Maybe we can barricade ourselves," Jack suggested, his voice shaky but steadying as he scanned the room for anything we could use. I didn't have the heart to tell him how futile it might be. There was no telling how powerful that creature was. Before I could respond, something crashed against the door we had just come through. It splintered slightly under the force. My breath caught in my throat. "We don't have much time," I urged, moving toward a heavy metal cabinet. With Jack's help, we pushed it against the door, but I could still hear the growl, now mixed with the sound of tearing metal. "We can't just sit here," Jack exclaimed, the desperation in his voice rising. Panic surged through my veins. What if there are more of them? Then, I noticed something jutting out from the corner of the room, a narrow stairwell leading down into darkness. "We can't stay here," I said, directing my gaze toward it. "We have to go down." Jack hesitated, but the door shuddered again. "Fine," he agreed, and we dashed toward the stairs. As I descended, I felt a cold chill wash over me, almost like the darkness was reaching out to grab me. My heart hammering, I looked back up towards the door. The shadowy figure was almost through now, its claws slicing the air. My intuition screamed that we had to move faster. I turned and raced down the stairs, knowing that whatever we faced next would be just as terrifying as the monster behind us, if not more so. But as the darkness enveloped me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to uncover something far worse than we could ever imagine. The stairs seemed endless, each step echoing with my pounding heart. Jack followed close behind, breathless and anxious. I couldn't shake the feeling that the very walls were closing in on us. The cold air wrapped around me, becoming heavier with every step down. Finally, we reached the bottom, where a dim emergency light flickered intermittently. The beam barely illuminated the small concrete space, creating dancing shadows that made me jump. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Jack shrugged, his eyes wide as they scanned the room. In front of us stretched a long hallway, lined with old examination rooms. Glass doors were fogged, making it impossible to see inside. We needed to keep moving, but a sudden noise made me freeze. A soft rustle, like fabric brushing against fabric, echoed from one of the rooms. "Did you hear that?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. Jack nodded, his face pale. We took a cautious step forward, the air thick with tension. I gestured toward one of the opaque doors. "Let's check it out." As I reached for the handle, Jack grabbed my arm. "Wait! What if it's another one of those things?" Weighing my options, I finally nodded. "Okay, let's just move." We slipped past the doors, sticking to the shadows as we crept down the hallway. But the further we went, the more uneasy I felt. Every creak in the building sounded louder, as if every ghost of the past was whispering secrets we weren't meant to hear. Then another rustling noise echoed again, now accompanied by a faint, high-pitched giggle. My stomach dropped. That didn't sound like any monster. "What the hell was that?" I whispered breathlessly. Jack's eyes widened in alarm. "I don't know." We turned a corner, and there it was, a single tattered doll lying on the floor, its glassy eyes staring blankly at us. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's when I saw it, a door slightly ajar, leading into a dark room lit only by flickering emergency lights. I felt compelled to push it open. The secrets behind those walls were intoxicating, yet frightening. "Should we look inside?" I asked, my pulse racing. "Maybe we should just go back," Jack suggested, but curiosity gnawed at me. What if it's a way out? Even as I spoke, doubt crept in. What if it was a trap? With shaking hands, I nudged the door open wider. Inside, the room appeared to be an old storage area. Shelves filled with dusty boxes loomed over us, and in the center stood a large covered object draped in a fabric that looked like it hadn't seen the light in decades. Suddenly, a loud bang rang out behind us, and I whipped around to see the door we just came through slam shut. Jack's eyes were wide with fear as he gripped my arm tightly. "We need to get out of here now." No sooner had he spoken than a low growl reverberated from behind the large object. I felt a surge of dread wash over me as I realized we had stumbled into something much worse than we initially thought. "Run!" I shouted. My instincts screamed that whatever lurked behind that cover was far more dangerous than the creature we just fled. We bolted towards the exit, adrenaline pushing us onward. But I kept glancing back, knowing whatever was hiding in that room would want to follow. We were in a race against time, and I feared the shadows had a plan of their own. As we sprinted towards the door, I could hear the growl grow louder, a guttural sound that echoed off the concrete walls. My heart was racing, and I felt the room close in around us. With every step, I thought about what might be lurking behind that drape. I couldn't shake the feeling that if we stopped to look, we wouldn't like what we found. The door loomed ahead, but it felt like it was miles away. In the frantic rush, I stumbled over an old box, sending it crashing to the ground. Jack let out a startled yelp, and I froze for a split second. The growl intensified, vibrating in my chest. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep moving. We reached the door, and I flung it open, throwing myself into the hallway. Jack followed closely, and for a moment we paused, gasping for breath. I glanced back, the fear still gnawing at my insides. There was no sign of whatever it was, but I felt it, lurking just behind the threshold we'd just crossed. "What now?" Jack panted, his voice trembling with the adrenaline still surging through us. I didn't have an answer. The hallway stretched indefinitely, and the ambient sounds of the hospital seeped back in. A flickering bulb, the groaning of old pipes, and echoes of whispers. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my ears pricking up. It was faint but persistent, like distant voices, barely above a whisper. Jack looked uncertain, his brow furrowed. "We shouldn't stay here," he said. I agreed but was frozen in place, trying to decipher what I was hearing. Then without warning, the flickering lights above both of us dimmed further, plunging us into semi-darkness. "Let's move," I urged, forcing myself to take a step forward. We crept down the hallway, each footfall a reminder of our vulnerability. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us. I strained to catch the words, but nothing coherent emerged. I felt a pull, as if the walls were urging me to uncover some long-buried secret. At the end of the hallway, I noticed another door, a heavy metal one that looked much sturdier than the others. It was slightly ajar, an invitation and a warning all in one. Just as I reached for it, a loud crash echoed from the examination rooms behind us. My heart dropped. "We should check it out," I said, though my voice trembled with uncertainty. Maybe it was a sign of what was still left in this place, something worth discovering, or perhaps a way to scare the lingering ghosts back into their corners. "Are you crazy?" Jack whispered harshly. "We need to get out of here." Before I could respond, the whispers coalesced into a single word: my name. I felt the world narrow down to just that sound, and I was drawn into it. "It's calling me," I murmured, a compulsive urge pushing me forward. With a sudden surge of determination, I pushed the door open. The cavernous space beyond was filled with rows upon rows of old, discarded medical equipment, the rusted machines looming like forgotten sentinels. There was a table in the center of the room, covered with faded photographs and yellowing papers. And that's when I saw it. A shadow at the far wall, moving silently and slowly. My breath hitched in my throat. Jack was right beside me, paralyzed with fear. Just as the shadow turned, the lights flickered completely off, and I was plunged into darkness. "What was that?" I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. Then came the sound. the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching us through the dark. The footsteps shifted just outside our periphery, slow and deliberate. I felt my breath hitch again, and I fought back the urge to scream. Jack was frozen next to me, and I quickly glanced around the room, searching for something, anything to defend myself with. "Can we just leave?" Jack whispered, his voice trembling with fear. I could hear the panic rising in him, and it raced through me too. But something kept me rooted, curiosity, terror, or maybe both. Just then, a cold breeze rushed past us, causing the papers on the table to rustle and dance. The whispers returned, low and urgent, almost pleading. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm felt like an invitation. I strained my ears, trying to find the meaning hidden in the noise. "Let's stick together," I finally managed to say, gripping Jack's arm. "We can figure this out." I led him deeper into the room towards the table. As we stepped forward, the footsteps stopped. The silence pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. I swallowed hard, the dry knot in my throat making it difficult to breathe. And then, before I could think, a flicker of light broke through the darkness, a small beam emerging from a nearby corner, illuminating a collection of medical instruments and a single photograph resting face down. "Look at that," I whispered, pointing at the picture. Jack moved closer, his curiosity battling with the fear still etching his features. "You think it's safe?" he asked, hesitating. "Only one way to find out," I said, reaching for the photo. As I turned it over, a chill washed over me. It was a grainy shot of a group of doctors, but one of them stood out. He bore an unsettling resemblance to the shadow I'd seen before. "Who is that?" Jack asked, peering over my shoulder. There was a name beneath the image, Dr. Edward Mallory. I felt the oppressive weight of the moment, a knot forming in my stomach. "What do you think happened to him?" Jack asked, his voice a tremor. Before I could answer, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped, and I felt a rush of breath against my neck, the unmistakable sensation of someone hovering too close. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, my heart galloping. But just as we turned to flee, the heavy metal door slammed shut, reverberating through the room. My blood ran cold. "That can't be good," I muttered under my breath. The whispers intensified, swirling around us like a storm. "We're trapped!" Jack cried, panic spiraling in his eyes. I spun around, searching for another exit, but the darkness enveloped us more tightly with every passing moment. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, and the footsteps resumed, breaking into a run. As I pressed against the wall, desperately trying to find a way out, I noticed something reflecting under the flickering light. It was a key. A single rusty key hanging from a nail above my head, taunting us in our desperation. "Jack!" I called, urgency coursing through my voice. "We might have a way out!" But just then a loud crash echoed through the room, and the source of the footsteps revealed itself, a hulking figure emerging from the shadows. My breath caught in my throat, and I realized that the true horror had only just begun. The hulking figure stepped forward, its bulk blocking the flickering light. I barely caught the outline, a tall shape swathed in shadow, limbs elongated and warped. Panic surged anew. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice trembling. The words felt weak, but I had to try. The figure paused, tilting its head slightly, as if considering my command. "Is it a person?" Jack whispered, his eyes wide with terror. I couldn't answer. The silhouette wasn't just anyone. It felt wrong, somehow twisted. I snatched the key from the nail above my head, my hands shaking. It felt heavy, almost alive in my grasp. I eyed the door, desperate to unlock our way out. "Let's go," I said, making a move toward the door. But the figure stepped closer, blocking me. Its breath came out in ragged gasps, an unnatural sound that sent chills down my spine. "I can't take this anymore," Jack cried. "What do we do?" We were running out of time. The whispers merged into a singular, shrill voice, practically screaming at us. I recognized the urgency in the sound. It felt like a warning. "I think it's trying to tell us something," I yelled over the noise, though I didn't have the slightest clue what that could be. The figure took another step, closer still, and I caught a glimpse of a face. It was grotesque, twisted in agony, and yet I couldn't look away. "I'm done!" Jack shouted. He lunged past the figure toward the wall opposite the door. He slammed his fists against it, as if trying to break an invisible barrier. "Jack, no!" I shouted, but it was too late. The figure turned its attention to Jack, and I realized now that it meant business. Just then, the key slipped from my fingers. I watched it fall, bouncing off the floor and sliding away under the table. "No!" I screamed, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. In that moment of distraction, the figure lunged at Jack. I gasped, lunging to grab him, but instead collided against the table, its contents crashing to the floor. The sound echoed, drowning out everything else. Papers scattered like leaves in a storm. And for a second, the figure halted. A flash of clarity hit me. "The photo!" I shouted, remembering Dr. Edward Mallory. If he was connected to whatever was happening in this place, maybe the photo could help us. I stumbled toward the table, desperately searching for it. There it was, half buried under a mess of papers. I snatched it up and turned back to Jack, who was still struggling against the figure. "Jack, look!" I yelled, holding up the photo. The figure hesitated, its eyes narrowing as if recognizing Dr. Mallory. That glance was all I needed. I ran towards Jack, brandishing the photo. "I think it knows him. Maybe we can stop it." But as I reached Jack, an icy hand closed around my wrist. I swung the photo upward, but the figure was faster. Darkness swirled around us, and then everything went silent. Then I heard it, a low, resonant whisper, lingering in the void. "Help me." I couldn't tell whether it was a plea or a threat, but it sent dread racing through my veins. In that unsettling silence, I felt the weight of the room shift. Jack was next to me, frozen. Uncertainty etched into his features. The shadow still loomed before us, but the air was different. I couldn't breathe. It felt charged with unresolved sorrow, like a wound that refused to heal. "Help me," it whispered again, softer this time, yet the resonance cut through the darkness. But whose plea was it? Did it belong to the being before us, or to Dr. Mallory, the doctor whose name hovered ominously in the air? Confusion swirled inside my mind, racking me with indecision. I dared to take a step closer, heart pounding. As I held the photograph aloft, a flicker of recognition seemed to flash across the figure's grotesque visage. I had seen that look before. Pain, loss, and an insatiable hunger that transcended life and death. The whispers resumed, slowly building again, layering over each other, an ever-thickening fog of sound. "Dr. Mallory," I ventured cautiously, though my voice trembled. "Is that you?" The chiaroscuro of shadows seemed to warp even further. The figure recoiled slightly, and in that fleeting moment, I registered the stark contrast. Was it fear, or something deeper? "Help! Me!" The sound emanated once more, twisting between longing and anger. In a surge of desperation, I pressed the photograph into the air between us. "This is you, isn't it? Tell us what you want," I shouted, and for a moment the chaos subsided. The growl softened into an echo of grief, as if the anger had been siphoned away. Clarity seeped into the darkness. "Trapped, lost, forgotten," it rasped, the words now chilling yet almost human. "Release the past." "How?" I shouted back, though my confidence hung by a thread. I felt Jack's presence beside me, tense yet steady. "Let it all go," the figure urged, a low wail accompanying the command. The air thickened again and surrounding shadows began to peel back. Were they memories? I felt the pulse of 1,000 untold stories, thick and fervent, crashing against my senses. I turned to Jack, desperation reflected in his eyes. "What do we do?" "Let go? Let go of what?" he murmured. But the force of the growl began to swell again, urgency claws scratching at our minds, and I couldn't hold back the fear that was choking me. Then a realization struck me. The keys. I remembered the rusty key and the hidden doors that promised to reveal the past. Maybe we need to find the other secrets of this place. "Are you sure?" Jack questioned, a flicker of doubt shadowing his resolve. I didn't answer. I had no answers. only uncertainty and the pressing need to break free from this torment. "This won't end unless we do something," I shouted above the din. "There are other rooms. Maybe if we put the pieces together. Then let's go before it's too late." Jack nodded, and we turned together, a united front. Clenching the photo tightly, as if it would tether us back to reality, we navigated past the malevolent darkness that writhed along the edges of our vision. We bolted for the blocked door, the sound of our footsteps clashing against the insistent howling echoing behind us. I was struck by the terror that something of the purest evil was pursuing us. Not just a creature, but an endless cycle of anguish clawing its way from the past. With determination, I burst into the corridor, each moment stretching like a raw nerve. Fear amplified everything, the air, the shadows, the whispers. We sprinted toward the nearest examination room, now veiled in shadows once more. As we entered, my heart sank. Within lay remnants of the past, rusted tools and forgotten memories mingled in disarray. "What if there's nothing here?" Jack panted, glancing nervously around. "Then we'll make something happen." Finding solace in his presence steadied me. My voice cut through the thickening tension. "Look, those shelves. There might be something we can use." We rifled through the debris, fingers grazing decades-old remnants of lives interrupted. Papers, boxes, and faded photographs scattered beneath our frantic movements. Patterns began to emerge in the remnants, hints of connection. "Here!" I shouted, pulling out a yellowing chart with the names of former patients scribbled in the margins. Dr. Mallory had left traces, promises unfulfilled, perhaps despair-laden threads that we could unravel. But even as I scanned the names, the air turned electric, and I saw shadows shifting at the edge of the room. The growl rumbled louder, and the temperature dipped sharply. "Time's running out!" Jack shouted, fingers trembling as he handed me another photograph he'd unearthed. "What about this one?" Eyes wide, I barely registered the image. A doctor standing before a group of somber patients alongside Dr. Mallory. "They're all connected," I murmured, piecing together a horrific narrative. The whispers crescendoed. "Help. Now. Release." In that instant, with the heart of the darkness beating louder, I grasped the key. It could tear down the walls of silence that suffocated the voices trapped in anguish. "We have to unlock the truth. We have to give them closure. Let's do it." Together we dashed toward the massive metal door, driven by a primal desire for freedom and hope. I lifted the key, heart racing. As I inserted it into the lock, a shudder rippled through the air, echoing the agony of countless souls unbound to the earth. In a swift motion, the door swung open. Light flooded in, a warm embrace after suffocating darkness. But the growl erupted violently behind us, a blaring siren of rage and despair. "Go!" I shouted, pushing Jack through the threshold. The moment we entered the new space, shadows flickered, but we charged ahead, not looking back, fueled by a desperate need to rewrite the past. Out into a corridor we ran, but my heart pounded as echoes surfaced, the voices rising and mingling, beckoning us deeper still. "No turning back now," I muttered, glancing at Jack, who nodded resolutely. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Together we disappeared down the hall, swallowed by the agonizing whispers that lingered like smoke, intertwining with every heartbeat as we stepped closer to the truth, untangling the threads of darkness and light that connected us all. In the end, we found ourselves in pursuit of answers, breathing life into faded echoes, forging ahead into the unknown. But the lingering question haunted us. What other shadows would we awaken in the pursuit of freedom? And at what cost? I moved to a different city 2 weeks later. Jack and I never spoke about that night again. The haunting memories are forever etched in my mind, a reminder of our encounter with the unknown. But it reminds me I won't be held captive by fear alone. Sometimes I wonder if I left something behind in that old hospital, and if those echoes are still waiting for their moment to be heard.